Hello, everyone, and welcome to TechSparks 2020. I'm Deepthi Nair, and it's my pleasure to host this exciting session on revolutionizing the state of education in India and beyond. In a span of a few months, especially in this COVID 19 times that we are talking about, it has accelerated the adoption of digital solutions by stakeholders of India's education sector and, to facilitate fast learning. The government's policies for improving access, equality, and the quality of education by leveraging technology has provided a further boost to this trend. These developments have led to a meteoric rise in the edtech sector, as we've seen in the number of deals and the number of funding that's happening in this edtech space. And analysts are now expecting nearly a 10x growth in the next 60 months. To discuss and help understand the changes, opportunities, and challenges that come with this industry, we have with us a panel of edtech industry leaders that are at the forefront of this exciting growth opportunity that we are seeing right now. I would like to first introduce Vamsi Krishna. He is the CEO and co-founder of Vedantu. Vamsi has deep experience in India's edtech sector. Before Vedantu, he was a co-founder and director of Lakshya, an educational enterprise founded in 2006. Welcome, Vamsi. I would like to introduce Krishna Kumar, founder and CEO of Simply Learn. A serial entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience in information technology. Prior to Simply Learn, Krishna was the co-founder and COO of Tech Unified, which got acquired in 2007. Welcome, Krishna.
Thanks, Dipti. Happy to be part of this forum.
We also have Mohan Lakshman Raju. He's the founder and CEO of Great Learning. Mohan has spent 10 years in Silicon Valley and has, as an entrepreneur and as well as a venture capitalist. He was also managing director for Tiger Global in India before co-founding Great Learning. Welcome, Mohan. Mayank, I would like to introduce Mayank Kumar, founder and CEO Upgrad. Prior to Upgrad, Mayank spent most of his professional career in the education sector. He previously served as VP Education at Bertelsmann and worked at the Tata Strategic Group, advising Tata's strategic direction. We have Suvik Sharma, Senior Director, APAC MongoDB. Suvik leads sales for MongoDB in India and ASEAN. He has 23 years of professional experience building businesses and revenue streams from scratch and leading successful sales organizations across various sectors, including cloud service, IT infrastructure, among others. So welcome everyone. This is the 11th edition of TechSparks. It's a virtual all immersive experience. I would like to start, my question asking Vamsi first. In the recent months, the K-12 business, which has seen so much of we've heard and seen so many schools and teachers talking about online classes and everybody scrambling to do this online class thing. K-12 business has seen significant changes due to the lockdown, digital adoption, and growing comfort with digital medium amongst students and teachers, right? So Vamsi, what is it that you are noticing? Tell us something interesting that's happening and that has influenced also how you are strategizing, for this segment.
Sure, Deepthi. Thanks a lot, first of all, for having me on the show. And yeah, as you can see that this TechSpark itself is happening online. So that same is the case with most of the schools and most of the outfits out there. So first and foremost, Deepthi, online education in general, and I'm very sure others would also agree to that, was any which ways showcasing was showing a very strong trend, right? Even before the whole COVID and the pandemic thing. In fact, as a company, we were anyways witnessing close to 3.5 times increase year on year in terms of anything, core usage, paid students, revenues and all. What this COVID has done very strongly is two things. One is because of this, especially in K-12, I'll talk about, because of the schools and these places undergoing lockdown. All the principals, teachers, and all the educators, they've also started talking about online education. And what did that do is obviously all the parents who were sitting on the sidelines and who were just thinking about online as a as a, to use the word, the time pass kind of a thing. They suddenly, once they were exposed to it, and when all the schools, many of them mandated it, and indirectly they got exposed to it. So the category awareness of online learning, shot through the roof, right? That is the one thing which actually happened, and happened quite fast. So normally the same thing I would predict would have happened within, like, say, 2 years, 3 years. This thing has made that same thing happen within months, right? That's one thing. The second thing which has happened also is when, and then this is where probably there's a mixed experience, but still, a lot of parents, when they actually saw this thing happening and saw the learning happening, the mindset change very strongly happened, that, what, this is also viable. This is also something which is, the jury is out there, that is it as effective as that, but still in their minds, this is a viable option. And tomorrow, when things go back to normal, this is going to remain as one option which they will continue to think about. So overall, the brand awareness of the category went through the roof, and obviously that's amazing, and this great thing for the entire ecosystem. Just probably talking about the numbers itself, we used to have, on our platform, all on 100,000 students who would come and take a live class, on Vedantu in somewhere around the Jan-Feb times. That number crossed 1.5 million last month, right? So this is the kind of, like, if you would see, if COVID would not have been there, I would have, I would have predicted this number to be somewhere around 4x, kind of the zone, right? But you could see that, that actually, is almost more than 10 times. So yeah, I think overall as a category, we all have benefited. I would say it's also great for the not just online learning, but the entire ecosystem, because the benefits which this brings is obviously immense.
Mayank, while Vedantu is focused on K-12, you at Upgrad, you're focused on higher education and specialization, right? You have also tied up with more than 100 universities in India to offer various courses. Talk to us a little bit about the business and tech challenges of these integrations and how you built a framework to overcome them.
No, sure. Thanks, Dipti. I think just to maybe pick up from where Vamsi left, I always say that while for K through 12, COVID has been a lift-off moment, an inflection point. But for higher ed and specialization, it has been a good tailwind. Unlike Vamsi, at least I personally haven't seen an inflection point in the higher ed space, and I let Mohan and Krishna also add to that. But overall, what did happen, Dipti, because of the COVID era, a lot of universities were not very capable of running things online. So they came to us saying, okay, can we leverage your platform? Can we leverage your technology tools? Can we look at some of the content and take it online? So from that context, yes, we did see a lot of university coming to us and figuring out how we can partner, collaborate, and take some of the programs online. I think that was a good sort of positive sign. With the right APIs, with the right toolkit, ensuring that we are linked to the LMS system of some of these universities, helped us in making the transition. So that's on the university front, Dipti, that we see a significant move happening from the university side. Cut to, on the other hand, when we look at the working professional ecosystem, there what we started seeing was they had time, so they can think of something, and across all discretionary spend, because you're not going vacation this year, you're not buying new clothing items. So education is the least guilty spend in that pecking order. So they said, might as well spend something on education. So that helped the working professional ecosystem for us during COVID era. But at the same time, job uncertainty, whether I'll be able to get my next salary or not, did have a sort of a counter impact in that journey itself. But I think I agree to Vamsi's point that because of all professionals and all adults sitting with their kids, seeing them learn online from the school, everyone started buying into the concept of efficacy of online programs. And I think that has not only impacted K through 12, but has also helped the higher ed and the specialization field. And I think in that context, we are seeing a greater adoption of online and greater acceptability of online. And completely with Vamsi, that what could have taken 4 years happened in 4 months, and it's going to stay there and not sort of taper off post the COVID era getting over.
So we'll come back to you guys again with some more points to discuss on that. I'll just move to Mohan. Mohan, Great Learning is also focused on the online higher education space, and it has experienced a 5x growth in recent months. Walk us through how your organization prepared itself to match up to this massive scale challenge, both from the business and tech standpoint.
There's a few parts to that. Like just building on what Mayank and Vamsi said, I think the biggest impact that has happened is that all the stakeholders that are there involved in education basically had to embrace online learning, right? And the big mind shift change. The ecosystem is fairly complex with the number of stakeholders that are there. You have students, you have parents, you have teachers, you have administrators, right? You have regulators, and then you have the intermediaries and participants in the marketplace, right? So for all of them, you had to adopt this, right? And so that was a great coming together. I'm sure Mayank can attest to this. I never imagined I'll be sitting in my study and actually doing a contract with the university. Mayank, have you ever dreamt of that before?
Everybody
Yeah,
knows.
but we've done so many like that, right? And that there's no circumstances under which in another world that could have happened in a normal world, right? So the mindset change, I think, is the biggest impact that has happened, right? So the other thing that, to build on what Mayank said, because people started thinking about investing in themselves and learn, right? I think it's partly maybe, because of the additional income, but I kind of disagree with Mayank that may not be the highest driver. The fact is, in an environment where there is actually uncertainty about job, I think people feel the need to actually equip themselves better, position themselves better, differentiate themselves better, right? So, and this is the question I ask people, right? So you talk about, yes, our programs may be expensive, but what is the cost of not learning, right? So can you measure that? What is the cost of potentially not having a job in 3 years? Right. So I think when put it in that perspective, it actually makes sense. And we, all of us are actually making it very easy for people to learn. So if there's one thing that edtech companies are doing, we're actually making it convenient for people to learn. In the past, learning used to be very disruptive. If you had to go to a campus, if the amount of time that you had to spend, the pain that you have to take, and the wasted time that used to be there is all gone now. Right now, we are able to offer, high quality learning to people from the convenience of their homes as per their schedule, right? So there is a tremendous amount of value that is being brought to the table. So one of the things that we had done was recognizing the fact that there are many more kinds of people that are now looking to learn online. We introduced a lot of new programs, shorter duration programs, free programs, different kinds of programs, and that definitely led in more adoption. In fact, in around January, February, we probably had about 50,000 people that had come onto our platform. Now we have more than 6 lakh people, right? So that number has grown like more than 10 times, like Vamsi observed. And, all of these people, of course, have different preferences and are doing different things, but they've all experienced online learning and are experiencing online learning. And I think, that's something that there's no going back from that. So that's a fundamental shift. And I think technology has never been the constraint, I mean, they have amazing engineers and amazing technical folks. So I think technology has never been the problem. In fact, I think now we are looking at what can technology further facilitate? How can we actually make online learning even better than campus-based learning? Our benchmark for quality has never been, something that people do on their own by reading a book or something that they do at poor quality institutions. Our benchmark for quality has always been what happens at the best traditional institutions, campus-based institutions. And I do believe that we can achieve that quality of learning, if not better, online.
Krishna, Simplilearn is present in more than 150 countries and is looking to double down on global expansion in the Middle East, Africa, and Far East. We would love to hear from you on how your organization deals with challenges of agility in setting up environments in different geolocations and dealing with latency expectations and different compliance and regulatory guidelines that come with global expansion. A lot of edtech companies are looking at, moving beyond India.
Yeah, so thanks, Deepesh. So first of all, I want to congratulate Vamsi, Mayank, and Mohan for all the growth, great growth that they have seen in the last few years. Of course, we have also seen similar kind of growth. But I wanted to provide some context about Simplilearn because we started long back, like in 2010. And 2010, there was no word called EdTech. It was remotely not there in the dictionary. In fact, this whole so one challenge that we had that there was no EdTech words. It was really very difficult to attract, retain, and hire people. Of course, it has changed completely in the last many years. And we were in the business of higher education, professional learning. I think there was another challenge in that area also, like lifelong learning. You need to learn to keep your job, or you need to learn to grow in your career. That category also was non-existent. Nobody was talking about. In last few years, what has happened that many other players like Great Learning, Upgrad, and some other players have got into this field. And together, I think this market is getting built. So when we started in 2010, we had no option because India was not a market. There were not many people willing to take this kind of courses. So we started offering our courses wherever there were buyers, and buyers were all across the world. And before it became a company in 2010, we also had a history of another year plus running it as a blog. And blog also had traffic all across the world. So when it became a paid venture, those same set of those free guys, they started buying our courses. So business has remained that way, right? It has remained as a global business. Today also almost 65% of our business is from outside India. And over a period of time, we have learned how to work on compliance, how to optimize. And there are a lot of agencies in the market who can help you. Compliance is not a challenge. As long as you're ready to spend money, there are people who will tell that I'll make you compliant. Like, there are these big four who are pretty much present in any country that you can imagine. So that's not a challenge. But what we are also of lately have started observing that, say, India itself has become a pretty big market. And it is no longer, our kind of courses are no longer only relevant to professionals. A lot of students who are in higher education institution, they are also going for such courses in addition to their prescribed curriculum. So I think instead of focusing on too many countries, I think right now we are focusing more on primarily two countries, US and India, and these two are pretty well understood country. And I'm sure a lot of players in our space will focus on these two countries because the product is very relevant for both the market. Like somebody who wants to learn, let's say, a data science or a machine learning, whether they are based in Bangalore, whether they are based in Boston, is the same technology. And the fact that Simplilearn and other Indian players, our model is more high touch, right? You don't learn only from video. It's not a self-learning solution. We know that not everybody can self-learn on their own. They require more help. And most of us provide that kind of hand-holding support that helps you get a classroom kind of experience sitting at your home or your office, right? So I see this trend continuing where more and more companies will also start focusing outside India. And if you look at other sector, not EdTech, if you look at software and space, I think this category is already emerging where people are building in India and trying to go global. So as more and more companies start following that approach, I think there will be much more know-how about meeting compliance, making sure that your latency and all those tech requirements are taken care. And again, as Mohan was saying, that technology is not a challenge. Like MongoDB is not an Indian company, but they are here to help you if you want to use their solution, right? And that is the case with all the tech solutions that we use today to deliver a good experience to our learners.
So as we heard how different, edtech companies are dealing with challenges around scaling, integrating different formats and systems, complying to different regulations. How does MongoDB enable their customers to meet these challenges?
Thank you, Dipti, for the question. But before I address it, I just want to congratulate my co-panelists for really leading the EdTech revolution in the country. They're doing a fantastic job in contributing to the learning from early learners to K-12 to like lifelong learning of professionals. So, that's a fantastic job that they're doing. As everyone was sharing their stories, I kind of bucketed what I heard in terms of challenges and required capabilities in like 3 buckets, right? So the first bucket was around scale. So Vamsi shared how they, scaled from from 100,000 learners to 1.5 million. And likewise, everyone had a similar story. And COVID, while did not really start the EdTech thing, but it definitely accelerated the adoption of EdTech, right? So a similar story we have with another customer of ours in Europe. So Bingle is part of Sonoma Learning, and they're the leading online platform for primary education in Belgium. And on March 13, 2020, they actually, when the Belgium government declared a lockdown due to COVID, they moved from being a leading online platform to part of the critical infrastructure for the country. And what that meant was, again, a similar kind of surge in scale. So they were doing maybe about 1.5 million exercises a day on their platform. It jumped to 12 million exercises a day overnight, right? So where MongoDB comes and helps that and made it very easy for them is because on our data platform, you can what we call shard or horizontally scale out just on a click of a few buttons. And that really allows them to scale up, scale down as per the demands. And so do our Indian customers, both in the EdTech and other industries, take advantage of that core capability of a data platform. There was one other interesting thing that came out due to COVID that we observed, as it relates to scaling. So what we saw for probably the first time, there were certain regions of public cloud providers that actually went out of capacity. Now that also puts another level of limit on scaling, right? So while MongoDB is available in 79 regions across the globe and across the 3 public cloud providers, just last week, we became the first database that allows organization to distribute data in a single cluster across the 3 major public cloud providers across the 79 regions. So what that means for EdTech companies and other organizations looking to scale is they're no longer constrained by the underlying capacity of their primary cloud provider. So that was a couple of observations on the scaling part. The second thing that I heard was around integration. We talked about universities and how we have to integrate with LMS, and a lot of our customers also talk about those things, right? So MongoDB is a document model database, as we all know. And while that's the most natural, intuitive way for people to develop, what it also does is it's a superset of all data models. So all different types of diverse data you can integrate in it. And what we have also done to make it far more easy is we have created the data architecture. It's architected in a way where applications can interact with the underlying data just through a single API and a single MongoDB query language. So that again makes it very easy to interact. And then JSON APIs, as everyone would know, is today the standard in which data is exchanged between platforms, right? And as an organization, our whole goal is to make it stunningly easy to work with data. And for that, we've developed a number of connectors. So we have like BI connectors to connect to any data visualization SQL reporting tool. We have Kafka connectors to connect to basically a messaging queue. And then for the more today, EdTech companies are constantly talking about AI, ML, and using advanced data science. So we've got an Apache Spark connector, which leverages the underlying pipeline generation framework that we have and a expressive query language to really create powerful applications in that space. And then just the last part was about the global expansion, and we touched about things, latency from compliance to regulations, etc. I think just the fact that we are present in so many regions and we are truly a multi-cloud option, now you're not restricted by which region your primary cloud provider is present in or not. As long as they're in one of the 3 public cloud provider, you can spin up a cluster just on a click of a few buttons. And through zone sharding, you can actually place data where you want it. So you can place data, let's say in South Africa, tomorrow you want to set up something, or you want to set up something in Indonesia or any other geography. You can actually say, this data should reside only there to take care of data sovereignty and latency issues. And we've helped customers comply with things like GDPR and FERPA. So as Krishna mentioned, that's not a challenge for most of the customers. The technology is there to help. So that's how MongoDB is actually enabling and working with customers in the EdTech space.
Yeah, so listening to all of you, this thought just came to me that there are certain blind spots. What do you think are the certain blind spots in this whole edtech space, and we see because. As I heard from all of you now, it's the time, it's not no longer good to have, but it's a very immediate and urgent for us, this whole edtech space going online and using technology to learn, etc., not only for higher education, but for the school level as well. There is this whole, besides your paying customers, there is this whole lot of, government schools. There are a whole lot of underprivileged schools, etc., that need now online learning, because for them also schools are not opening up. And so I would like to hear from you guys, like, how do you plan to, partner with governments, and how do you plan to reach this untapped segment, which may not be your paying customers?
I think we do offer a lot of free courses, right? That if you can't afford, you can just subscribe to any of our free courses and pretty much learn a lot on your own. And plus, not only provided like us, I think YouTube is a great source for anyone who wants to learn and learn completely free. So I don't think someone who wants to learn not having access to capital is going to stop their learning, right? Of course, if you have capital, maybe you can get better support, maybe you can get better hand holding. But if there is a desire to learn, I think there are a lot of ways and means for people to learn, and that's the beauty of so much of content and good quality content available online.
Content is there, and if people want to learn, they can. Like Krishna said, I think what we are charging for, and what our payments are for, is that there's a lot more than content that we offer. Unfortunately, those things cost money. Right. And in fact, I think the holy grail for us is to see how can we bring the marginal cost of that same, high quality delivery so low that it becomes even more affordable for everyone. Right. And that unfortunately can only be solved through technology. Right. So today, there's a lot of the guidance and the hand holding, as you spoke about, right, that is provided by qualified people, and qualified people cost money. Right. And therefore there is a significant cost to what we do. Otherwise, the content itself has, zero marginal cost, almost zero marginal cost. Right. And so that's why many of us actually offer a lot of very high quality content, for free. The key is to see how can we actually bring that support element, the hand holding and guidance, how to make that so cheap. And that has to come through technology. And that is the real promise.
No, I completely second that. In fact, if you just look at the kind of the dollars spent on generating this free content across just the company sitting over here, it would run into multi-millions, right? So just talking about as is Vedanto, like if you go on our YouTube channels, we are the largest K-12, channel out there. We get the 65 million unique views in a month itself. So I don't think so. I think the best thing which has come out, and I can tell you this from my own preparation, right, is that there isn't a lack of content out there, right, as Mohan was telling and as Krishna was saying. So the child or the student who needs to learn, there are, like, just you need a phone and an internet connection, right? And it's out there, and that, I think it's a beautiful thing which has come out of the edtech revolution, if I have to put it in that way. And as Mohan is saying, see, we think of, and almost I can speak on behalf of most of the companies over here. We look at ourselves as more of service providers, right? So content is more of like, content is there out there, and most of it is free, but the service layer on top of that is what really provides that extra learning outcomes, right? And that is what probably the companies charge for. Just answering another question which you just said, which you asked, sorry, was around the schools. See, I think there's a lot of work happening, Deepti. If you look at if you look at some of the government initiatives around the Diksha program, right, and they have some equivalent programs for even higher ed. They have such programs for K-12. And I think many companies are contributing to that. So for example, we ourselves have contributed content to the Diksha app, right, which is an app in which government school kids can go and probably look at videos and stuff like that. And multiple companies, I'm not just talking about Vedanto, but multiple companies have contributed to the content. Then there is another thread which is going on in which talks about creating a kind of a tool for the schools to use, right? And there's enough good work happening also there, right? And enough companies are contributing there as well. In fact, in April and May, the first quarter when the lockdown happened, we actually sort of like made our tool for teaching and learning free for schools to use, right? And many schools approached us, and there are a lot of other companies also who done the same, right? So I think, yeah, as as companies, all of us do believe in giving that value, right? In which more and more institutions can probably use and adopt and can teach their own kids or others. Because see, in a way, it is important, because till the time the awareness of the category doesn't spread, right? I mean, that's ultimately the motive here. So all the things which we can do to essentially helps with the overall uptake of the category is something which we do look at doing.
There's some audience questions that are come in, but before that, one question that I would like to ask, and this a lot of people have been saying this. I've been hearing this from everywhere. As you said, Mohan and Vamsi, you also, that the service that you provide, right? The experts that you are making people get in touch with, kind of teachers, like anybody sitting maybe in a small town to a big town to Singapore to Hong Kong, anywhere has access to best of, as long as you are willing to pay, to best of teachers out there. How do you see this play out? Like, you think that the market for teachers is going to go down, or because people would all want to learn from the best teachers, right?
I completely, I strongly believe the market for teachers will never go away.
Yeah.
I think the teachers are always required, and a right teacher with see the thing, I see it in a very different manner. Books were available for centuries. So content was never a problem. I could have gone to any library and read any kind of books, but people would still come to the IIM Ahmedabad, IIM Bangalore, IIM Calcutta's of the world, because the same Kotler book was being used by each institutions in a different manner by a different teacher presenting a different sort of approach. And therefore, if you hear what each one of us have said, that for us, content is like a book. Now the book is written, everyone can read the book at any point in time. But what we are trying to do, Deepti, at the end of the day, is standardizing the entire delivery infrastructure. That can I ensure that I can aggregate the teachers who are at IIM Bangalore, IIM Calcutta, IIM Ahmedabad, doing the research, but those quality of teacher can come in. Now imagine if a great teacher who's able to sort of cover 200 students a year in an institution can start doing 2000 students a year, the access of that quality of education will go away. So what we try to do as part of the EdTech ecosystem is take away things which are not that value additive for the faculty member, and therefore ensure that the faculty member is driving and putting a lot more effort towards coaching, guidance, mentoring, feedback, and not as much in lecturing. Because lecturing, you can sort of read up from a book and sort of go through this. It's a very simple Socratic way of learning. But at the end of the day, to cover the quantum number that this country requires to be taught in K through 12, higher ed, and adult education, the number of mentors, the number of coaches, the number of teachers, the requirement will continue to increase as we even scale up, because people will require better quality mentors, better teachers. And I strongly believe, this is my gut feel, that if India took up the IT mantle, India could also become the teaching capital of the world, where we have the most qualified teachers trained in English language and cover a large portion of the ecosystem. So I'm sure that what Krishna said about Simplilearn, leveraging the best mentors from here to cover global markets, is absolutely a large opportunity available for each one of us.
See, I strongly believe that next 10 years, some of the largest global EdTech companies will be from India. What happened in our IT services body, if you look at the IT service companies, if you look at any kind of cut, some of the best and the largest companies in every category, be it the multi-billion-dollar category or $100 million category or $500 million categories, will be Indian companies. Something similar is going to happen in a tech space also, because there is inherently a lot of value in this whole hand-holding support. You need someone who can help you then and there so that you can proceed. And books were always there, but still we built so many institutions who uses the same book to teach, as Mayank was saying. So I strongly believe that next 10 years, if you're having the same debate in 2030, I think most of the companies who will survive and thrive by that time will become large global companies.
And Deepthi, if I may just add, right, I think what everyone is sharing is the fact that content is always available, right? So, and I absolutely agree that teachers, and the importance of teachers will continue to grow. When the content's available and you have a growing number of teachers out there, where technology really plays a role is in simplifying the access to that content, A. So that's one area. And then the second area where technology can play a role is how do you make that content more digestible, more understandable, and more relevant, right? And personalizing that content for each person out there. So I think that's the space where technology can play a role, right? So when you think about access now, in a country like ours, let alone the rural part of it, but even in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, the access of internet is not the same for everybody, right? So how do you, while the content is there, how do you ensure that everyone has at least a similar experience or near similar experience while accessing that content, right? And these are some areas where the technologists come into play. The other part is in making the learning more digestible, comprehensible, etc. And again, there are a number of technologies in AI, ML space that come to help organizations do that. So I think that's really the role of technology. But to say, is online going to replace the importance of teachers? No, at least we don't believe that will happen. I think they'll coexist and they'll complement each other is the way we look at it.
I'll just give a little different perspective. In fact, I would say that edtech and online learning will actually increase the value of the good teachers. Okay, so earlier, let's say if you were a very good technologist or you were a very good doctor, there were disproportionate returns that you could get, right? Or a very good lawyer, so for teachers, such opportunities didn't exist, right? And teachers historically have been one of the most underpaid professions for commensurate to the value that they add. They have been one of the most underpaid professions, and that's been a global trend. It's not just in India. Globally, that has been the case. I think that's going to change, and it's already changing. Because of the ability that the edtech platforms are giving teachers to reach a lot more audience, to really differentiate themselves and kind of get out of the constraints imposed by very, very archaic structures that have been there in the education systems. Teachers are actually going to capture a lot of the value that they're creating. So I think, like in any other industry, the way the professionals earning curves are going to emerge, right? That kind of curves are going to emerge for teachers as well. So the premium for good teachers is going to go up a lot, right? And therefore, I don't think there'll be a better time to be a teacher than in the years that are going to come ahead.
Yeah, I agree. You can be a millionaire and be a teacher and just be at home, right?
And there already are, by the way.
Yeah, there are.
I was about to say that this already is there already. So
that's right. Yeah. That's right. In fact, I think it'll be interesting to see if there's a billionaire that a teacher becomes. That will be the.
Yeah.
There used to be a very interesting thing, Deepthi. I think it used to happen in South Korea that before the classes used to start, all the teachers used to go for plastic surgery. Because they needed to look much better before the season starts. So it was a season time for them. And I'm sure with the scale things are coming in, our teachers will go through that revamp before the board examination coming in, that they need to sort of get ready to be presentable in the process. So I think all those things will happen in the Indian ecosystem as well.
Yeah, because right now I'm sure you must have also seen there are so many videos going viral about teachers, how they are managing, how jugaad they are doing of having their phone, in some kind of over books and stuff, like all doing jugaad, how best they can teach, make their classes easy for students. So some questions that have come in. One is, of course, many of you have talked about this and answered this in many ways, but still I'll take this question. What will the future of education in India look like? So will it all be completely virtual? Will it be, will we revert back to traditional ways of doing things, or will it be a hybrid of both? So if you all want to, anybody wants to take this question.
I think we have to look at different spaces differently, right? So I'll let Vamsi speak about the K-12 space. I think for younger kids, I think expecting everything to happen online, just I don't think makes as much sense. I think there are way too important things that are outside of education that happen, when you are, physically meeting in a school. So I think the online may be there in supplemental areas, but I don't think core early education is going to sustain just in an online mode. When it comes to higher education, right? So I do believe that online learning will play a very important role. Particularly, I think outside of the top X number of institutions which today provide high quality education, once online is providing quality and at an affordable price, that will put a lot of pressure on the poor quality institutions to either improve or perish, right? So I do believe that a sizable portion of the higher education market will shift online, and it has already been happening in several parts of the world. So it's a no-brainer that it's going to happen in India. And of course, professional learning, I don't think offline makes sense at all, right? So that just was adding overheads and burden to professionals. I think that is going to be 100% online. I don't think it's going to be there in the maybe for very senior leaders, who don't have time to do all of this. There's value in networking and all of that. There's going to be your traditional high-end exec will probably still happen offline, but otherwise most professional learning will go into online or at most blended.
So I think the question which we need to probably really answer is what all are the new possibilities and the new way teaching and learning will happen, right? Doesn't matter really offline, online, or some hybrid. It will obviously be hybrid, right? So basically what we are talking about are just differences in the mediums, right? But what I'm most excited about are the possibilities. And if you look at today, the possibilities which are happening was definitely not the case in fact, when we were studying, right? And that's the most exciting part. In fact, think about it in this way: that if this whole pandemic and COVID would have happened, let's say 10 years back, what would have been the situation about the teaching and learning system? So the answer is pretty simple. Things will gravitate towards a place where there is a value which is being delivered to the student, right? And if that value which is being delivered to the student is only possible in an offline context, then it will remain offline in those areas. If the value being delivered to the student is equivalent or even better in an online context, then it will move towards online. And this we have seen consistently, right? So for example, for a pure teaching and learning, the online value which we are able to provide is in some cases 3x, 4x better than the same class happening with, let's say, 50, 60 students in an offline and setup. And when students and parents are exposed to those use cases, they don't see any value for going out and in fact paying extra, right? Incurring extra cost in doing the same thing, wherein the same value, if not more, they're finding in an online equivalent. But there are still remain few areas, as Mohan was telling, in which maybe online can still not, deliver the entire value, right? Like for example, in kindergarten, for example, right? Or for labs, laboratories. So yes, it is going to be a very good, balance between these two. But yes, wherever value is being delivered, equivalent or better, it will gravitate towards that.
I'll add one more item. See, while there is a hard value, like whether you learn it or whether you are learning well in offline or online, but I think there is a lot of social value also associated with being in a group of similar age kids, right? So as long as that has importance, and I think during schooling, during undergrad, that's, in my view, if I'm sending my kid to a school or a college, I'll give more premium to that, because I think over a lifespan of a person, I think that has a pretty vital role to play. After some time, like once you're done with your undergrad and you go for higher education, postgrad and all, I'll give less value to that, because I think your personality has evolved. And after that, you're going to a place because you want to learn those hard skills and become better at that. I'm sure their online has much higher value proposition than going offline. You save time, you save cost, you learn from the best and whatnot. But wherever this social has a role to play, I think their offline makes a lot of sense.
So we'll take one more audience question as our time. We are also running out of time. How is technology, like all of you are leveraging technology, is going to improve learning outcomes?
One of the areas that we are seeing edtech companies leverage technology is really using AI, machine learning, etc. Now, why can they do that? You just heard, right? Vamsi on their platform has 1.5 million registered users, right? Which is a huge wealth of information out there, right? How do you use that wealth of information to be able to personalize, curate content, to be able to identify individual gaps, to be able to improve that learning process, right? And this is not manually possible for somebody to kind of manage that kind of volume. So this is where technology, AI, etc., can come into place, and they're already doing it. So I'm just kind of preaching to the choir out here, basically. The other part of it is, again, nullifying that whole access part that we talked about. So like, for example, a customer of ours is CBT Nuggets. They have these short video tutorials, 20 minutes to up to an hour. And what they realized is there's a disparity in the access people have to their content. So they adopted a offline first model, which basically means, using a mobile product, which is MongoDB Realm, you can put that content right on the mobile. So there's no latency issues. And when you're back in a zone where there's good connectivity, you can connect straight back to the backend server. So again, that's an example of how technology can improve. So I think where technology plays a role is the whole experience part of the learning, and also to the teachers. You're giving them analytics to identify what are the areas they can focus on, what pupil needs, what kind of help, and then also trying to bridge the gap on the access to that content. These are just some of the areas that we have seen with our customers, how they're using technology for it.
Without outcome, education will not exist. So I don't think that's what we never call ourselves tech ed, or we always call ourselves ed tech, which is education will always come before that. And the journey of, I think, interestingly, you can actually coin this panel discussion as Bachpan se Pachpan tak. And for the entire Bachpan se Pachpan, outcomes will matter at each and every stage. Be it you are in a K through 12 ecosystem where Vamsi is focusing on, or on higher ed and adult education where the rest of us are focusing on. At each level, a different kind of outcome that people will look for. And I think every place outcomes will matter, whether it's improvement in grades, whether it is moving up in your career, whether it is finding the next job, and whether it is sort of getting promoted in your existing sort of job as well. Everyone looks at our education from that context. But my biggest worry at this point in time, if you ask me, from the COVID era, is that if we fail to deliver on outcomes, the upsurge that we are seeing will not sustain. And therefore, all of us out here, I can very confidently say that all of us are more worried about maintaining and delivering on outcomes than on getting the next million user, because people will come. I think it's not a rocket science that online will become mainstream, online will become the main area. People will come to us as long as we are delivering and staying true to the outcome. So from a leverage of AI, looking at data, figuring out basic data science to predict how each learners learn, I think all of us are doing everything that we could do. At the same time, I also want to caveat that this is a very, very hard problem to solve. How do you leverage data to determine outcomes and improve on outcomes? It's a very difficult problem to solve, and all of us in our own right are doing our own sort of steps in ensuring that our learners are finding outcome at the end of the day.
I'll just add, another kind of dimension to this, right? So, if you think about how learning actually happens, and like the research that has gone into the science of learning, what goes in, right? So there are various aspects. It's a cognitive task. It's a cognitive activity, right? So it involves motivation. It involves retention. It involves application. Right, being able to demonstrate that you actually have absorbed it and can apply it. It involves people getting feedback, right, to see how they are doing, so that that feedback loop is very, very important. right? It involves, it's a social activity, right? So the peer-to-peer interaction and learning from each other and that sense of competition, that's an important dimension of this, right? And then converting your learning outcomes into some kind of demonstrable career outcomes, or demonstrable, like, in the case of K-12, it could be you kind of clearing a test or an exam and getting a certain score. In the case of professionals, it could be cracking a job interview and getting a job, right? So to converting. So these are all the things that have to happen, for learning to be successful, right? So I would argue that, why are most educational institutions not good? Because these things don't happen. All of these things don't happen in that, in that setting. In fact, technology for the first time allows us to measure all of these things independently, right? And actually see which of these are happening, which of these are not happening. We were just calculating this the other day. On a daily basis across all of our learners, there are about 1.5 million data points that we are calculating on a daily basis. Okay, so we have a very, very good insight and deep understanding of what is happening, what is not happening, who is it happening for, who is it not. And this never happens in the physical classroom. You don't, like education, after I heard this story long time back, after 4 years you get a 1-page transcript. That's the only data that is produced after 4 years of education. You go to a doctor and get a blood test, you get a 14-page report, with about like 100 metrics that are measured. So education historically has been very lossy, whereas online that can actually be completely changed, right? So I think there's going to be a lot of use of education, even in physical brick and mortar, a lot of use of technology in physical education as well, which hasn't happened. And that's going to be coming from the edtech world. The lessons that are being learned in the edtech world will actually now get adopted in the physical world as well, seeing the benefits.
No, that's true. I mean, we can't underscore the importance of it. I think I don't even think it's a question, Deepti. In fact, I could go on and actually talk about this a lot internally. That this is the brand. A brand would be created in an education which actually stands for learning outcomes. If in our case, in K-12, though, we are very clear about this. If the attribution of the success of the child, the student isn't going through your product, then there is no way your product will fly, right? And maybe in higher employment enhancement programs, if the candidate is not coming back and telling to his friends that because of this A product, my salary improved or my job prospect improved. I mean, and that's the learning outcome thing. I think many people misunderstand brand for the advertising and all the the jazz stuff, but frankly speaking, at the core, the learning outcome, this is the brand actually. That's where the brand really lies. And there's a lot of connotations around it, and I think, as Mayank said, all of us are doing whatever can be done. Mohan mentioned about those million data points. I think we have having operated in offline before, actually, Vedantu, I can tell you it was all subjective and offline, and here we can actually really tell what's working, what's not working. We can also do a lot of gimmicky stuff. So, for example, in our kindergarten K5 division, wherein we teach kids, we now use technology even for enhancing learning experience. So I just wanted to add one bit to this question you asked. So one is the learning outcome, but there's also something called learning experience, which is essentially the input metric. So the input needs to be really well thought about, because that would lead to an output again, right? So even in input technology, it can be used a lot. And I think all of us are doing it. Just to give an example, in early years, we are doing some stuff like those filters in which if the kid did something right, suddenly a crown would come on his or her head and showers come. And this all gimmicky stuff. But really makes the class exciting, engaging, and that then, generates the interest in the kid, and the learning outcomes ultimately happens. So it's a lot of stuff, and I'm very excited about to see that where this thing goes in the next 5 to 10 years. This is an area where I think a lot of innovations will happen.
So that gamification part, what you were saying, right? Those are the things that I guess you guys are also incorporating it. And there's no doubt that this is a sunshine sector, and there's no doubt that it's here to stay. EdTech, people online, learning online. And my takeaway from this was that as long as the startups are adding value to the students and the learners, I think it's all going to be good. And there's a lot of work for you guys to be doing there. So thank you so much for taking time out and being part of this conversation. There are so many more questions that I have that I want to ask, but in the interest of time, I think we'll end it here. And thanks a lot for joining us. Thank you so much.